The war almost ended 3 years early, not by a battle, by a betrayal no one called by its name. Newport, Rhode Island, August 1778, 6,000 British soldiers trapped inside the city, 12 French warships blocking every escape route by sea, George Washington mobilizing everything left of the Continental Army for the land assault. For the first time in 3 years of blood and starvation, victory didn't depend on luck. It depended only on two allies executing the same plan on the same day. American soldiers marched in silence, not from discipline, from fear of believing. 3 years watching promises turn into defeats. 3 years burying friends who died waiting for reinforcements that never came. Now the reinforcements were there. Real ships, real cannons, an alliance signed between nations. Newport would be the proof that France wasn't just watching, that the revolution had a future beyond survival, that it was worth continuing to believe. Admiral d'Estaing was already drawing surrender maps. French officers discussed who would get which captured British ships. No one looked at the horizon where the sky was darkening. No one knew that trust in war is the only thing more dangerous than despair. The storm arrived like judgment. 48 hours of wind tearing off masts, waves breaking decks, French ships dragged to open sea, while sailors held ropes with bleeding hands. D'Estaing lost control of the fleet in one night. When the sky cleared, 3 ships were destroyed, 4 others, too damaged for combat. The perfect blockade had become wreckage scattered along the coast, and inside Newport, the British watched, counted the ships, measured the distance, recalculated the odds. The siege that seemed inevitable now had holes, escape routes, time. Washington still believed. He sent messengers to the French fleet. Quick repairs, attack in 72 hours. We cannot lose this moment. The response never came, because d'Estaing had already made his decision without consulting Washington, without warning the Continental Congress, without explaining anything beyond dry orders, complete withdrawal to Boston, long repairs, indefinite regrouping. The American soldiers received the news in silence. They didn't shout, didn't protest, just stared at the empty sea where the French fleet should have been. They were already positioned, artillery ready, attack routes memorized. 3 years of war had taught them not to waste ammunition, not to waste movement, not to waste hope. And now the French had wasted everything for them. Officers tried to reorganize, maybe attack alone, maybe retreat with dignity. But the British already knew that the American army was exposed, without naval cover, without guaranteed retreat route, without allies. Newport wouldn't be a victory. It would be a massacre if the Americans didn't run fast enough. And running, after 3 years of resisting, seemed worse than dying. The retreat began before dawn. It wasn't tactical, it was controlled panic. American soldiers dismantling camps in the dark, dragging cannons through mud roads, carrying wounded on their backs because there weren't enough wagons. 3 years of war had taught a brutal lesson. Armies that retreat slowly become corpses. The British attacked at first light, cavalry chasing the American rear guard, muskets firing at men running without looking back, bayonets reaching those who stumbled. It wasn't a battle, it was a hunt. And the American soldiers knew they were being hunted because an ally had decided that naval repairs were worth more than colonial lives. Washington received the reports in silence. Casualties, deserters, abandoned equipment, destroyed morale. But the worst was in the eyes of the officers who survived. It wasn't anger. It was something colder. Doubt. If France could abandon them like this, without warning, without explanation, without remorse, then who to trust? What alliance to believe in? Why keep fighting for a revolution that depended on the goodwill of empires that didn't care? In Boston, D'Estaing began repairs. French officers drank wine while discussing future strategy. Sailors mended torn sails. No one spoke about the Americans left to die in Newport, because to France that wasn't betrayal. It was pragmatism, military calculation, sensible decision. Ships were worth more than colonists. They always were. Washington wrote letters he never published, words about allies who disappear when you need them most, about empires that sign treaties but don't bleed for them, about the difference between partners and tools. The letters stayed locked in drawers, because publishing them would mean admitting the obvious. The American Revolution was alone. It always had been. The fury exploded in Boston 3 days later. American officers arrived demanding explanations. French soldiers blocked the entrance to the barracks. Someone pushed back. Swords were drawn. There was no official duel, but there was blood. There were shouts in 2 different languages saying the same thing: traitor. Washington arrived before it turned into civil war between allies. He found D'Estaing supervising repairs as if nothing had happened, as if men hadn't died running from Newport, as if the alliance wasn't shattering. The conversation was short. D'Estaing explained with impeccable logic. Storm, damage, tactical impossibility. Decisions any competent admiral would make. Washington listened in silence. He didn't shout, didn't accuse, only asked one thing: would you have abandoned French troops the same way? D'Estaing didn't answer. He didn't need to. In the halls of the Continental Congress, the debate happened behind closed doors. Break with France? Impossible. Without European allies, the revolution would die in months. Continue trusting? Suicide. Newport proved that French interests came before American lives. The final decision was the cruelest. Swallow the betrayal. Smile at the allies. Pretend Newport never happened, because weak revolutions can't choose their friends. They can only pray their friends don't kill them first. Washington returned to camp without answers. His officers asked what would happen now. He told them the truth. We continue, alone if necessary. And everyone knew what that meant. It meant the war would end when the Americans won, or when no one was left to fight. Newport became a ghost in official memory. No monument, no commemoration, no mention in speeches about the glorious alliance with France. Only soldiers who were there knew the truth, knew that powerful allies have their own maps, their own interests, timelines that don't include desperate colonists fighting for survival. The lesson cost lives, cost trust, cost the illusion that weak revolutions can negotiate as equals. But it taught something no victory would teach. Dependency kills faster than bullets. Washington never forgot. Years later, when the war finally ended, when French diplomats expected eternal gratitude, he kept calculated distance, not from resentment, from learning. Newport taught that nations act from interest, always, and revolts that survive on others' mercy die at the first change of wind. The soldiers who ran from Newport under British fire also learned that screaming for help doesn't guarantee a response, that treaties signed in Paris don't stop bullets in Rhode Island, that the difference between ally and spectator is just one storm. Some deserted, tired of trusting. Others stayed, not from believing in the alliance, but from understanding that the revolution would only end when they stopped depending on it. The war continued for 3 more years. There were other battles, other alliances, other French promises kept when convenient. But Newport remained as an invisible scar, permanent reminder that empires don't save revolutions. They only observe, calculate, and help when the costs are worth it. The United States survived, not because France was generous, but because soldiers who ran from Newport had decided they would never again run trusting others' promises. And that decision, bitter, lonely, desperate, was what transformed colonists into a nation. Because nations are born when they stop waiting for rescue. Newport never entered the history books as it should have. There was no victory to celebrate, no hero to glorify, just the naked truth. The first great alliance of the United States almost destroyed the revolution it was supposed to save. If D'Estaing had stayed, if the storm hadn't come, if the British had been crushed that August of 1778, the war would have ended 3 years earlier. Thousands of lives spared, cities not burned, families not torn apart. But that's not what happened. What happened was the most brutal lesson of the American Revolution. No one is coming to save you. Not empires, not allies, not treaties signed with blood and promises. Washington learned, the soldiers learned, the Continental Congress learned. And when the war finally ended, not in 1778, but in 1781, the United States emerged different. Not grateful, cautious, not dependent, suspicious, not saved by allies, survivors despite them. Newport taught that revolutions don't win through external generosity. They win when they decide that the only reliable help is their own strength. Let me ask you something. Those soldiers who ran from Newport under British fire, abandoned by allies who promised to be there, did they have courage or just desperation? And if it were today, if current society faced what they faced, 3 years of war, hunger, betrayal, no guarantee of victory, would we have the same resilience? Comment down below. Do you think courage is something you're born with, or what's left when all other options disappear? Because Newport proved one thing. Heroes aren't those who win. They're those who continue when they should have quit.